You lie down, you close your eyes, and out of nowhere your brain pulls up a conversation from 6 hours ago. Not the whole thing, just one line, one pause, one look. And suddenly you're wide awake, replaying it like it's evidence in a trial nobody asked you to run. If that's happened to you more nights than you'd like to admit, I need you to hear this. It's not overthinking. It's not anxiety being dramatic. It's your brain running a process. It never asked your permission to start, and once you understand what it's actually doing, you'll never look at those 2 a.m. replays the same way again. Here's what's really happening. During the day, your brain is too busy handling input to process it. You're talking, reacting, performing, managing your face, managing your tone, managing what you say next. There's no bandwidth left over to actually sit with what just happened. So your brain does something clever and slightly cruel. It waits until the noise stops. It waits until you're lying still, lights off, nothing left to manage, and that's when it opens the file it couldn't get to earlier. This is called cognitive rehearsal, and it's tied to something psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, named after Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who discovered that unfinished tasks stick in memory far more persistently than completed ones. Your brain treats an unresolved emotional moment the same way it treats an unfinished task. It won't let it go until it feels closed. And a conversation where you're not sure what someone meant or whether you said the wrong thing doesn't feel closed. So your brain keeps opening the file, hoping that one more replay will finally give it the ending it's missing. If a moment felt even slightly threatening, socially, emotionally, your body doesn't process that threat in real time the way it processes a physical one. It flags it and moves on because moving on was necessary to survive the rest of the day. Then, later, in the quiet, your nervous system finally has room to ask, wait, was that okay? Am I safe? Did I mess that up? And because it's dark and you're alone and there's no new information coming in to correct the story, your brain just keeps running the same rough draft over and over, convinced that if it thinks about it hard enough, it'll land somewhere solid. It won't. And that's the part that actually explains why this feels so exhausting. You're not solving anything at 2 a.m. You're just re-experiencing the same uncertainty on a loop. And every loop convinces your body a little more that this is something worth staying alert for. That's why you wake up tired even after 8 hours. Your body wasn't resting. It was standing guard over a conversation that ended hours ago. If this is sounding a little too familiar, go ahead and hit subscribe. Because we're about to get into why some people do this every single night and others almost never do. And the difference isn't willpower. It's something that got wired into you a long time ago. Here's the pattern researchers keep finding. People who replay conversations obsessively tend to share one thing in common. At some point, usually early, being misread had real consequences. Maybe a parent's mood shifted fast and you had to catch it before it escalated. Maybe one wrong word in a group of kids meant being excluded for weeks. Somewhere back there, your brain learned that misreading a moment wasn't just uncomfortable, it was costly. So it built a system to prevent that from happening again. Replay, analyze, predict, prepare. It's not a flaw. It's a system that used to keep you safe, and it never got the memo that it can stand down now. The problem is, that system doesn't know the difference between a genuine threat and a slightly awkward pause in a conversation with your coworker. It treats both the same way, full alert, full analysis, full replay, because shutting the system off selectively was never an option it was built with. It just runs, every time, on everything, whether the situation actually calls for it or not. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because I guarantee at least one of these is going to hit close to home. You send a text, and the second it says delivered, some part of you starts calculating. Did that come across weird? Was that too many exclamation points or not enough? You reread your own message like it's a stranger's, trying to imagine how it landed on the other end. That's the same system. It's not really about the text. It's about your brain trying to predict a reaction before it happens, because predicting used to be safer than waiting. Or maybe it shows up differently for you. You're in a meeting, someone gives you a look you can't quite place. And for the rest of the day, that look is running in the background of everything else you do. You're half in the room and half somewhere else, trying to decode 40 seconds of someone else's face. And here's the thing that makes it worse. Most of the time, that look had absolutely nothing to do with you. They were thinking about their own lunch, their own deadline, their own life. But your brain doesn't get to know that. It only gets the ambiguity, and ambiguity is exactly what this system was built to chase down and resolve. There's also a physical piece to this that almost nobody talks about. When your brain flags something as unresolved, it doesn't just store it as a thought. It keeps a small current of stress hormones running in the background. Low level, barely noticeable, but present. That's part of why replaying a conversation at night doesn't just keep your mind busy, it keeps your body mildly activated too. Your heart rate doesn't spike, but it doesn't fully settle either. You're technically lying down, but you're not actually at rest. And that's the gap between being in bed and actually sleeping that a lot of people can't explain. Now let's go a little deeper, because there's a reason this specific pattern tends to show up worse at certain points in your life than others. Think about the last time you were going through something big, a breakup, a job change, moving somewhere new. Notice how the 2 a.m. replays got worse during those stretches, even about conversations that had nothing to do with the big thing. That's not a coincidence. When your baseline stress is already elevated, your threat detection system gets more sensitive across the board. It's like turning up the gain on a microphone. Suddenly, everything picks up more noise, including moments that would have passed right through you on a calmer week. So if you've noticed this getting worse lately, it might not be about the conversations at all. It might be a sign that your overall stress load has crept up somewhere else. And the replays are just the symptoms showing up in the most inconvenient place, right when you're trying to fall asleep. There's another layer to this worth sitting with, and it has to do with what kind of person tends to get caught most often. If you grew up as the observant one in your family, the one who could read a room before anyone said a word, this pattern probably feels like it's been with you your entire life. Being observant was useful once. It might have kept you out of trouble, kept the peace, kept you one step ahead of a mood shift you couldn't control. But that same skill, when it never gets to switch off, becomes the exact thing keeping you up at night. Because a mind trained to notice everything doesn't get to choose when the noticing stops. It just keeps running the scan on your coworker, on your friend, on a stranger who barely looked at you twice because for a long time, scanning was how you stayed safe. Here's something else that might surprise you. The people who replay conversations the most are very often not the ones who did something wrong. They're the ones who care the most about getting it right. Genuinely careless people don't lie awake wondering if they hurt someone's feelings because it doesn't occur to them to wonder. The fact that you're up at 2 a.m. dissecting a sentence you said 6 hours ago is, in a strange way, evidence of how much you care about the people in your life. That doesn't make the exhaustion feel any better in the moment, but it's worth knowing that this pattern and being a good person tend to travel together far more often than this pattern and being a bad one. So what do you actually do with this? Not stop thinking, that's not realistic, and honestly, it's not even the goal. The goal is giving your brain the ending it's actually looking for, instead of letting it loop forever. When a moment is stuck on replay, say the resolution out loud, even quietly, even just to yourself. Something like, that conversation is over, I responded the way I could in that moment, and I don't need new information to close this. That sounds almost too simple, but you're giving your nervous system the thing it's actually been searching for this whole time. An ending. Not a perfect one, just one it's allowed to stop circling. The other thing that actually works is catching the replay early, before it's had 30 minutes to build momentum. The second you notice you're back in that conversation, ask yourself one question. Is there new information here, or am I just replaying the same 3 seconds again? If it's the same 3 seconds, that's your brain confirming there's nothing left to solve, it's just looping out of habit. Naming that out loud tends to break the spell faster than trying to force yourself to think about something else. There's one more piece worth mentioning, because it changes how you relate to this whole pattern. A lot of people try to fight the replay by distracting themselves, scrolling, watching something, anything to drown it out. And that can work for a few minutes, but it doesn't actually close the file, it just buries it under new input. The replay is usually still sitting there waiting for you the second the screen goes dark again. What actually works better is giving the thought a fixed time and place instead of letting it show up whenever it wants. Some people write the moment down earlier in the evening, just a sentence or two, and tell themselves they'll look at it again tomorrow if it still matters. More often than not, by tomorrow it doesn't. If you want to take this a step further, there's a technique some therapists use called scheduled worry time, and it applies almost perfectly here. You pick a specific 10-minute window earlier in the day, not right before bed, and you let yourself fully replay anything that's bothering you during that window, on purpose, with your full attention. It sounds counterintuitive, giving the thought more airtime instead of less, but here's why it works. Your brain isn't trying to punish you at 2 a.m., it's trying to make sure the thought gets processed at some point. If you give it a guaranteed appointment earlier in the day, it stops feeling the need to ambush you later because it already knows it's getting its turn. Most people who try this notice within a week or two that the nighttime replays start losing their grip, not because the thoughts disappeared, but because the thoughts finally got somewhere to go. It also helps to understand what actually ends this cycle, because it's not thinking harder about the conversation, it's giving your body evidence that the moment is actually over. Your nervous system doesn't fully believe you when you just think the words, "It's fine, it's over." It responds much better to something physical alongside it. A slow exhale, longer than your inhale, tells your body directly that there's no threat active right now, faster than any reassuring sentence ever could. Try this the next time you catch yourself mid-replay. Don't fight the thought. Just breathe out slower than you breathed in 3 or 4 times, and notice how the loop tends to lose some of its grip almost immediately. That's not a coincidence either. Your body was never waiting for the thought to resolve. It was waiting for a signal that it was safe to stand down. If any of this explains something about your own late nights, drop a comment and tell me the last conversation that kept you up. Because chances are a lot of people watching this are nodding along right now with you. And if you want more of your own patterns explained like this, subscribe, because this channel exists to turn the confusing stuff your brain does into something you finally understand instead of something you just live with. One last thing before we go, because I think it's the part that actually matters most. This pattern, the replaying, the analyzing, the 2 a.m. detective work, it isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that somewhere along the way, you learned to take other people's feelings seriously, and your brain built a system around making sure you never accidentally hurt someone without knowing it. That system is loud and exhausting and badly in need of an update, but the instinct underneath it isn't broken. It's actually one of the more decent things about you. The goal was never to shut it off completely. The goal is just teaching it that it's allowed to rest, that not every pause needs a post-mortem, that most people forget the thing you're still awake over by the time they've finished brushing their teeth. You're not broken for replaying things. You're running a system that used to protect you and just never got updated. The good news is, now you know that. And knowing that is usually the first thing that finally lets you sleep.